Are you on the Mishnayos thing, Adam?
I'm on.
Okay, very good. Finishing Masech today, hopefully, to figure out which Masech we're going to next. Okay. If we are on Mem Tes, let's see. Mem Tes on the base, 49. No, not Mem Tes on the base. No, I'm a little ahead of myself. Mem Ches on the base, 48b. Okay, 48b in the art scroll, it's 48b1. The last thing that we said yesterday was we made a distinction between the stick that you made as a handle for the axe and the laundry guy when he goes ahead and he takes and he stitches the garments together. That we said that when it comes to the axe, the only time they're considered like one is only when during the time that he's using the axe. But once he's not using the axe, when he finishes the work, we said it's not considered attached. However, when it came to the garments, we said that if the laundry guy when he stitches the large garments together with the small garments that they shouldn't get lost, it remains like one until he starts to untie it. Even if you finish the laundry, we said that it's still considered like one. And that was the question the Gemara said. Why is it that when the work is done, not during the time of work, it's still considered attached when morning asaf by the laundry, but not considered attached by the hammer, the axe with the wood and handle. So the Gemara said that the difference is because when you finish with the axe and the handle with the axe with the wooden handle, it's common you take the handle out, you throw it with the other piece of wood. You're not really interested in that being together. You don't need it to be together. It doesn't serve any purpose for you once the work is done. So once the work is done with the axe, it's not considered the fact that they're together does not make it like one because it's standing to be removed, and I have no interest in it being together. It doesn't serve me any purpose. So therefore, they're not considered like one. If one becomes tameh, the other thing does not become tameh. However, but a laundry guy, we said he's happy that it should be attached even when he finished the laundry, because just in case it gets dirty again, he won't have to restitch it. That's what we said yesterday, right? We said now we're up to Besurim Matnala Shmaita Mishedaf Chisda. So in the art scroll, it's 48b1, right side on the bottom. You know, we had the story of the laundromat. So we see if you have two different utensils, right? Two different garments, a large piece of the garment and a small garment. If they are attached together, stitch them together to do the laundry, we said they're considered like one regarding contamination. That if one of them becomes tameh, the other one has the status of tumah, has the status of contamination. Now the Gemara wants to say more. You're going to discuss this issue in more detail. In the town of Surah, they learned the following in the name of Rav Chizda, and in Pumbedisa, and in the town of Pumbedisa, they learned it in the name of these are two great towns. And for Badita, they learned it in the name of Rav Kahana. The following statement was said in the name of Rav Kahana, and some say it was said in the name of the name of Rava. What did they say? Who was the author? The following that was said by the Rabbanan. The rabbi said, when something is attached to another utensil, even though they're independent of the other utensil, they have the same status of that utensil. For instance, Rashi says, let's say who's the author of the Mishnah that we said earlier, of the Shlasha Kovsin, of when you have the garments, the two garments that are attached together, the large garment, the smaller garment. Who's the author that says that when they're attached together, they have a status of one? That we look at, we treat the two garments that are just stitched together, that they shouldn't fall off, they should remain together, even though they're independent of each other. This is my large jacket, and this is my small little jacket, whatever it is. And they're considered like one, that when one of the jackets or one of the garments becomes contaminated, it's as if the other one also became contaminated. If you recall, we said when you have two garments touching each other, a garment will not make the second garment contaminated, even if it touches the second garment, because a garment which receives contamination from the source of tumah is a rishon. It's considered first generation. It's not the dad. It's the child. The child cannot make another garment contaminated. The child, being not the source of contamination, doesn't have the power to contaminate a garment. To contaminate a garment, to contaminate a person, you need a higher level to contaminate. You need, let's say, the source of contamination. To contaminate food or liquid, you need much less. You could be a derivative, you could be a first generation. That's not a problem. First generation could contaminate food or liquid. But when it comes to contaminated utensil, a keli, you have to come from a higher level source. Therefore, the fact that two garments touching each other will not, if garment number one is touched by the dead mouse, it's not going to contaminate garment number two. Garment number one does not have the ability to contaminate the sherets, the mouse could contaminate if it touches one, if it touches two. But if it touches just one, now one doesn't have the power to contaminate two. But we're saying, but if one and two are stitched together, because the laundry guy wants to put it together, then when the mouse touched number one, we look at it and as if the mouse touched number two as well.
Right. You just go over touch.
We go for the touch of one of them, and that we treat it as if it touched both garments, right? If the mouse touches both garments, there's no question that dead mouse touches both garments are contaminated. But here the phenomenon is that mouse, the dead sherets, only touch one of the two garments. Now, if the two garments were separated, not attached together by this stitching, only the one that got touched is contaminated. The mouse did not touch the other one. But being that these two garments are now stitched together, the laundry guy stitched them together, that unites the two garments as if that we treat them as what? As one. So therefore, if the mouse touches one garment, it's as if it touched both, and both are contaminated.
I forgot what the original Shabbat issue was before we got into these comparisons.
Yeah, so the Gemara, because we
Right,
got
right, the stuffing, right. Can you move? So it comes back to Shabbat. Can you move things that are touching?
but Shabbat, we're referring to the case of opening up the collar, cutting a hole in the
Right.
garment to be able to put it through your head. And we said you can't do that on Shabbat. And we questioned that. We had a question, why is that different than the barrel? That we say you could open up the lid, take
Right.
off the lid. And we said that made a distinction because the lid is not is an outside item that's attached to the barrel, and the barrel is a complete item by itself. So that's in contrast to the garment when it's attached. When when you made the hole in the neck of the garment, you made a hole in something that was attached, right? What happened was the garment was attached to itself, and now you made a hole in the item. So you finished the item itself, because since it was attached, right? The garment was attached to itself, the whole garment, and now you went ahead and you made a hole in it. Now you're completing the item. In contrast to the barrel, the seal was not part of the barrel. The seal is not a part of the barrel. The seal is out. The lid is outside the barrel. It's something. So that the Gemara uses the expression zechibur. This is um, part of the barrel itself. I'm sorry, part of the garment itself, and in contrast to the the lid, it's not part of the barrel. It's an outside. So we were talking about something being attached and something being not attached. That we're going to
So
also
those are
show.
other
So
examples.
other examples of something being what ramifications of attached and not attached. If you consider something as one, you consider something as independent. Let's say and that has ramifications regarding the garments. The garments of the laundry guy we consider like one attached, even though it is two separate garments, and the lid is also separate from the barrel. But regarding contamination, we look at that as one.
Right, so does that tell us that when we look at Shabbat,
So Shabbat, we're saying by Shabbat we're saying the barrel is not it's not part of it's not joined together. The barrel is not joined together with the lid as one. It's two independent things. In contrast to the shirt when it is one item.
so, yeah, so what's confusing is with Shabbat, we're using the standard of, are they operationally the same?
Right. So Shabbat, right.
It's a
Shabbat,
different standard.
right. It's a different standard by Shabbat than contamination. Like you're right. Because by Shabbat we're saying good morning, Boker Tov.
Actually, I thought it was, yeah, that's 7:30.
The Rizzimin is 7:30. Yes.
I'm sorry, no, it's 7:30, right?
Now it's 6:58.
Right, no, but I thought it was at 7.
No,
7:30.
it's the 7:30. 6:30 and 7:30. So if you want, you could join the class. If you want, you could. We'd honored to have you.
Yeah, sure, thank you.
But you should remember to say, but if you remember to say, you can get share by the table. You can pick up the tikkun. Did you get a chance to say Birkat Torah yet? Okay, beautiful. Okay. We are on now 48b. We welcome to the good morning, Ezra. We made a statement beforehand in the Gemara that if you have multiple garments, a large garment and a small garment, let's say, and a kid's shirt and a child's shirt. And the laundry people in the old days, they did laundry in the old days, right? Remember that? And they would put, the laundry guy would be afraid. He didn't want something to get lost. Maybe they did the laundry outside, in the river or wherever it was. And he would stitch the two garments together temporarily. And then afterwards they would give it back, one assignment, and after they would give it back, then they would unstitch it, right? When he gave it back to the customer, he wanted to make sure that nothing got lost in the deal. So he stitched the two garments, the large garment and the small garment together. Now, the Gemara says there are interesting ramifications. While it is stitched together, these two garments, we look at it as one, just like your shirt. if you have whatever stitch, if you have a patch that you stitched onto your shirt, you're not going to say the patch is one thing and the shirt is another thing. It's stitched on. It's considered like one. So too, the chidush is, would seem the novelty is that even though you plan on removing this, you don't. It's only a temporary joining because you're only keeping it on for the duration of time that during this laundry process, till you finish washing it, and then you're going to write something. You're going to separate it, give it back to the guy. But while it is stitched together, if a dead sheretz, one of the 8 shratzim, one of the things that have the creepy animals, let's say a dead mouse or something, if it comes in contact with this, touches one part of the one garment, that of the two that are stitched together by the laundry guy, we view it as if it's one thing. And therefore, if you touch one garment, the other garment also becomes contaminated. That is the chidush. What the Gemara is now looking for is who is the author. I mean, you made the statement. I want to know who's behind it. Who's the author? Who's the rabbi behind it? So that's what we're up to today. We are on 48b1. And that's where it starts. If you look on the right side, Besura Matnila Hashmaita Bishmed Rav Chisda. You got it on the right side? 48b. What's your name, sir? Daniel.
Yeah.
Daniel. So we got it. Besura Matnila, you have it? Besura Matnila Hashmaita. Besura, they learned the following in the name of Rav Chisda, one of the great. Rav Chisda is one of the great rabbis of the Gemara. And in Pumbedita, another great town, they learned it in the name, the following statement in the name of another great rabbi, Rav Kahana. For Omrilay, as some say, it was said in the name of the great Rabbi Rava, Rava Rabbayah, which made the Rava. What did they say? Man Tana Milta Dam Rabbana. Who is the author? Simon, you have a Gemara, Simon? You're good. Okay, you do an old-fashioned style, right? Okay, we like it. Classic. Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Gemara is called Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law. Simon is doing the original. Now, who is the author? It says, Kol HaMechubalo, anything that's attached, when the two items are attached to each other, Haru Kamahu. They have the status. You got it, Ezra? Yeah. Now we're still on B1 on the bottom. 48b1 on the bottom paragraph. Who is the author? When it's attached, wherever it's attached, how are you come home? They're like one, even though they are independent of each other. Right? Like I said before, a patch on a garment on your pants is not independent of your pants. It's one item. But if I have two pieces of clothing, one is a large, big shirt, and one's a child's shirt, and now you go in and you stitch them together, they have nothing to do with each other. And yet we say as long as they're stitched together, they're like one. So who is that? Who is the author of that? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Yehuda says the name of Rav. Rav Meir, it's Rav Meir. The author is Rav Meir. Bitnan. We learned in the Mishnah in Kelim. There's a nice picture in the Masifta of the Gemara. Here we're talking about, let's say, an earthenware stove made out of clay. And they would, just like people like to have compartments around your stove. You store pots in there, different types of compartments. So they would store, let's say they made these things to store spices, or they stored oil. They want the oil to get warmed up. They'd be in the compartment they would attach a utensil to the stove itself. It'd be like in a compartment on the side of the stove, and that will warm up the oil. So they had this stove with these vessels that are connected that were attached to the stove. Beta pach, beta tavlin, beta nesha bekira. So you have this kira, the stove made out of earthenware that you cook on top, and you have small little earthenware utensils that are attached. You attach these utensils to the thing, like a beta pach. Beta pach is like a pach shel shemen. Everyone knows by Hanukkah they found a pach shel shemen, like a flask of oil. They put oil to keep it warm, so the heat of the stove will warm up the oil that you store in that compartment. And you had a place that you kept some spices, very user friendly, right? Everyone needs storage area, and and we also had a Beit Haner. You had a place where you would go ahead and keep candles, like like for lighting purposes. Maybe you would light something there. Now these utensils were independent. This, but what you do is you take a little cement, a little whatever, and today we'd call it paste, a little paste or some glue, and glued on these these utensils to the walls of the stove. If so, the Ritva says if a stove was originally made, then there won't this way. That won't be a question. But here it was made. It was added on later. These compartments. So how do you view these compartments of the stove? Do you view it as all one? So if the dead sheretz, if that dead mouse goes into the oven, these also become contaminated, and vice versa. If it goes into the airspace of these compartments, then the rest of the oven is also. Or do you look at these parts and the oven as independent of each other? That if the dead sheretz, if the dead mouse went into one, it only would contaminate that area, that stove, and wouldn't contaminate the compartments, and vice versa. That's the question. How do we look at it? So comes the Mishnah, and it says these compartments mitamin b'maga ve'ein mitamin ba'avir. That they will contaminate if through touching, but they won't contaminate through airspace. Now, there is what does this mean? Let's explain. An earthenware vessel is unique. Made out of clay, how does that become contaminated? So that comes contaminated not through touching, but rather through coming into the airspace of the utensil. It's not the, look, what's it? Good morning, Mark. Welcome back. Bruchim habayim.
I just want to say hello.
No. What? Right? Okay. We'll take it. Even to say hello, we'll take that also, Mark. Great to see you. Safe trip, Mark. Very good. Thank you, Mark. Now, see here, this unique thing, and the commentators explain why. I think they say because one idea is earthenware doesn't have, when you take metal, like metal has significance. The metal itself is something that's chashuv, right? So if if the dead mouse touches the metal, so it can contaminate the metal. But what makes earthenware, clay, what gives it something of importance? Its use. You could contain something inside of it. Because really, earthenware is a very non-important type of material. It's not a good material. We saw when you use it for fire, it gives a bad smell, or whatever. It doesn't clean well the oil. Maybe I'm not bad smell. Maybe the oil doesn't clean well, It's clay. It's very cheap. It's very cheap. So therefore, what gives it importance is its use. And the use is generally it contains something. So the ear space inside, so it really gives its importance. So therefore, it receives contamination by something going into the ear space. So now, if the contamination fell inside the oven, and when it fell inside the oven, it touched the walls, or it touched morning, Boker Tov, David. It touched the walls or the bottom of the oven. That's called tumat maga, right? It touched. It went into the airspace, and it touched the thing. That oven will be contaminated. If it went inside the airspace and did not touch the walls or the bottom, that's called contamination of the airspace. And the only thing that's contaminated is the utensil that it went into its airspace. So let's explain what's going on over here. We're saying the following, just to bring David up to what we're talking about here. We have an oven made out of earthenware, and then we attach to the oven some compartments. Other earthenware utensils, small, we attached it in, we glued it on, whatever, we pasted it on with some cement or whatever it is, and they serve other purposes. They serve other purposes. We store our spices in there, like a spice compartment. Sounds good, right? Now, how do we view these utensils, these compartments that are attached to the stove? Do we look at them as one or not look at them as one? Meaning, if let's say a dead sheretz, a dead mouse, goes into this compartment, the ear space of one compartment, would that make the stove also contaminated? Or if the stove gets contaminated, does that make these little utensils that are attached to the stove contaminated? Do we view them as one, or do we view them as separate entities? If they're viewed as one, so when this becomes contaminated, the other things become contaminated. If these are two separate entities, only the thing that got the dead sheretz would be contaminated, and the other thing will not be contaminated. So it says in the Mishnah, it says the following. Rameya says that if it depends where that sheretz, let's say that dead mouse, did it just enter the ear space, or did it actually touch actually the walls inside? Did it, or the bottom of the oven, or the bottom of those compartments, or did it go into the air space? And he makes a difference between if it went into the air space only, or air space and actually touched. And then the Gemara is going to ask the question, what's the difference? Why should that make a difference? But that's what we're saying now. If you went in just into the airspace, so then only the item that it went into its airspace would become contaminated. Let's say the oven. The dead mouse went into the airspace. Let's say someone put it in, was holding it in, let's say, the dead animal, but did not touch inside the oven. So now those compartments that are attached to the oven do not become contaminated. And vice versa. If the dead mouse went into the airspace of the compartment, but did not go into the oven itself, only that compartment will be contaminated and not the oven. That's what the Gemara is going to say. Now, Divrei Rameya. That's Metamim and Maga, will be contaminated with touching, but not with the airspace. But Rabbi Shimon Metaher. Rabbi Shimon says, even if it goes into the airspace and touches the bottom of the oven, only the item that it touched would be contaminated and not the other item. We views them as totally independent. The compartments that were subsequently attached to the stove are not part of the stove itself. And therefore, what happens in the stove does not affect what happens here. What happens here does not affect what happens there. Is that clear? Now, so the Gemara is going to ask the obvious question. You could tell me they're independent of each other. So if they're independent of each other, so whatever happens here doesn't nothing to do with what happens over there. But how could you be half baked, so to speak? Excuse the pun. How could you say if it goes inside the airspace, then I consider it, not attached. They're independent of each other. But if they actually go in the airspace and it touches inside, then they view them two things as one. Either they're considered one or they're not considered one. What makes it? What should be different if it enters the airspace or it touches inside the inside? If they're viewed as one, then if you enter it, they're supposed to be contaminated. They're not viewed as one, so who cares that you touch inside and touch the oven? Who cares? It's independent of each other. So how can you? What should it make a difference if it went into the air? Airspace has the ability to contaminate the oven. That's what makes a earthenware utensil contaminated. It's just going inside the air. If this is the utensil, if you have a cup, here's a cup. If it goes inside here, it didn't touch. It didn't touch the cup. Didn't touch here. Didn't touch here. It just went into the airspace. If this would be earthenware, this utensil will be contaminated because the sherets, the dead mouse went into the airspace. The kid was playing around, David, and he was, playing with the mouse.
Very remote, the
Right? Yeah, we have to see how it's going to happen. But that would be a case that this will become contaminated. So if you say what's the difference if it went into the airspace? What's the difference if when it went inside and it touched the wall? You don't need it to touch the wall to make this thing contaminated. So why should we make it's more strict if it touches than it just goes in the airspace? That's the Gemara's question. Bishop Rav Shimon, according to Rav Shimon, I understand Kasav Kira Dummy. Rav Shimon says it's not like the oven. The compartments are independent of the oven. Now we're on 48B2, about 7-8 lines from the top of the page. According to Rav Shimon, it's not like the oven. El Rameya, if you consider the compartments that are attached to the oven like the oven itself, because you attach them together, so then if it's like the oven, I feel about oven, I mean the tame. So even if it goes into the airspace of the oven, it should have the same status of the oven. If you look at them as viewed as two independent things, I feel about maganam along the tame. So even if it touches inside the oven, inside the walls, touches the wall, but if they're independent of each other, it should not affect the compartment outside. Is it clear what the Gemara is saying, everybody? So the Gemara says, La'olam, the Gemara says, Lavki Kiradovi. Really, in truth, the compartment that's subsequently attached to the oven, which serves its own individual purpose, you store the spices there, you warm up the oils there. That's not the oven itself. It's independent. It's not one entity. But the rabbis said that we have to make a fence over here. We have to say we're going to treat them as one, because most probably the rabbis are concerned that if you originally made the oven in that fashion, not that you subsequently attached these compartments, you made the oven like you designed it with the compartments as part of the oven itself. That would be one entity. And now, if you're going to say that when this compartment's added on, it's not considered one entity, people will make a mistake when it's really part and parcel of the thing. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, so why do the rabbis only strict when it actually entered the contamination, the source of contamination entered into the airspace and actually touched the walls inside? Even if it entered into the airspace, it didn't touch the walls inside. It just be a problem, because if the same way you're concerned, if it touches, it should be the same problem if it enters in the airspace. So why, if the rabbis want to make it like one rabbinically, so why do they make a distinction where the dead mouse went, if it went in and touched inside or just the wall or just went in? If you want to make it like one, go all the way and make it like one. So the Gemara says, because there's a concern, sometimes there's something called a astringency that might lead to a leniency. You got to be careful of that. What does that mean? Because like what the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, of the Rabbanan Hakera, the rabbis wanted to make a recognition, something you should recognize. You shouldn't burn truma and kadashim. What does that mean? Truma, right? The food that we give to the Kohen, right? We give about 2% of our crop to the Kohen. 2%, not so much, right, David? Not too much, 2%. David is a Levi, right, Levi? Levim get 10%, right? Okay, they give 10%. Now, but there's 24 gifts that go to the Kohen. The Levim don't get 24 gifts, with all due respect. Okay? Pidyon HaBen goes to the Kohen, not to the Levi, as you know, right? And many other things. Now, if you have Truma or other sanctified foods, holy foods, Kedoshim, if they touch, if they would touch something that's a source of contamination, they touch a dead mouse. So the Truma and the Kedoshim that touched it, that became contaminated, you burn, right? That's what you do. You burn it, it's contaminated. But what about Truma and Kedoshim that's not Tameh, that's Tahar, that's pure? You're not allowed to burn it. You have to keep it, you have to burn, you have to keep it. You keep it, you can't burn it, you can't discard it by burning it, right? There's a concern, if you're going to say across the board, it doesn't make a difference how this item became contaminated, whether the sherets went inside the air or actually touched inside, you're going to say it's contaminated. You know, people are going to think that if Truma or Kedoshim touch this oven, it would be, you have to burn it like any other Truma and Kedoshim that became contaminated. But really, on a Torah level, it's not contaminated. Why? Because on a Torah level, we're saying that really the compartments and the oven are independent of each other. If the oven becomes contaminated, the spices that are in the compartment does not become contaminated on the Torah level. So on a rabbinic level, it's going to become contaminated. And how are people going to remember that and know that? Because now you can say, what's the difference, Rabbi? It's contaminated. But there's a big difference. Because something that's contaminated on a rabbinic level, you can't burn. Truma that's pure on a Torah level, the rabbis made a stringency, but they're not going to say you could burn it while it's, because on a Torah level, the rabbis recognize this is not contaminated. So that the stuff that's in the compartment is independent of the oven, of the stove. And if the stove became contaminated, but on a Torah level, the stuff that's in the compartment is not contaminated. And how are we going to make sure that people will remember that and not make that mistake? So by saying there's a difference in how it became contaminated, people are going to say, why is there a difference? Why did the rabbis say there's a difference it became contaminated, but it entered this airspace, or it entered the airspace and went inside and touched the wall? It's because the rabbis want you to know, because this is a rabbinic law, that when this becomes contaminated, the other compartment also becomes contaminated. Or when the compartment becomes contaminated, the other part becomes. And therefore, by making this difference between the way it received the contamination and how it will affect the other item, is people are going to recognize that this whole law is a rabbinic law. And if they know it's a rabbinic law, they're not going to come to burn the truma or kadoshim as a result of this. And therefore, the rabbis are protecting the Torah law. So that's what I mean to say. The rabbis, at the same time, they might make a stringency, but they want to be careful that not something wrong will come out of it. Because the rabbis are saying it's contaminated. And they're saying that for a purpose, to protect the people, but then maybe people are going to make a big mistake as a result of that. So, that's why sometimes people have to understand if the law is rabbinic law, the law is a Torah law, because the rabbis will give you certain laws, like for instance, a bracha on food is a rabbinic law. Why is it important to know it's rabbinic or Torah? You got to do it. You have to say a bracha, bless before you eat. Because if you're not sure if you said a blessing or not, being that it's a rabbinic question, you will not say the bracha. If I'm not sure did I say the bracha on this food or not. Now, why don't I remember? That's the problem. I should remember if I said the bracha now. Where am I? Do you forget your name ever? Rabbi, you don't forget your name. Why do you forget if you said the bracha? Right? So that would be a question on me. But nevertheless, because it's rabbinic, I know I will not say another bracha on this food out of doubt. Safik bracha lakel, because it's rabbinic law. If it will be a biblical question, did I say birkat hamazon or not? Then I should say the birkat hamazon. It's a safik daraita. If I had enough that I was satiated. So there's ramifications of knowing rabbinic and Torah law. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. We welcome Daniel from Panama. We like Panama. Panama is a great place. I had the honor to visit Panama, go for a wedding to Panama once. It's a beautiful Kehillah. Thank you for joining. Anytime you want, 6:45, Monday through Friday. You come from Panama, you can join us. We'll take you anytime.
Thank you.
Upstairs, and then breakfast is downstairs after.